Welcome to Unmistakably Star Wars. In this edition of Rebels Reaction, I'm Tyler.
And I'm Christine.
Christine, or I guess I'm just out of habit. It's been a while since we've been on. We've had 2-3 weeks since we've had an episode?
Yep, and it's been a busy couple of weeks.
Very much so for us and for Star Wars, and we'll get into that in a little bit. Christine, your one-word reaction to The Ghosts of Geonosis Part 1 and 2.
Cycle.
Interesting. I wonder what that could mean.
You will find out.
That I will. My word is tie-in.
Oh, that's 2 words. You could put a hyphen there.
There's a hyphen. Yes. All right, stick around to hear more. Let's go.
You know of the rebellion against the Empire?
Perhaps you referred to the imminent attack on your rebel fleet.
Where is the rebel base?
I didn't know there was anyone willing to stand up against the Empire.
All right, we're reacting to Ghosts of Geonosis, the first couple episodes of, or the first film, I guess is what they call these 2 episode arcs.
Yeah.
Of season 3, part 2.
Oh, dang.
Let's dive into your one-word reaction.
Cycle.
Why cycle?
Okay, so it started the thought process, the cyclical thought process, when it turns out that Rex is the one who trained Saw Gerrera and his sister, and set them on the course to become rebels. And they, of course, helped Galen and Jyn specifically, and he raised Jyn, and she comes into the story later. So it's kind of this cycle of characters we know having had relationships that clearly impacted other characters we know. We don't find out until later, and it's this big cyclical process.
Yeah.
And also, as I was thinking about that word, the thought came to mind of the cycle of violence, how Saw had violence in his past and loss in his past. Mm-hmm. And as a result, he is very close to causing someone else to have major loss. He, the last moment, chooses not to, but he's very close and very determined to essentially commit genocide, the last 2 beings of this one race, because of the violence and the loss in his own past.
Yeah, and I think dovetailing off of that, as far as my one-word reaction, we're seeing kind of in the broader scope of Star Wars so many tie-ins of characters that we're familiar with, characters that are showing up in other venues, mm-hmm. and how they're impacting the story overall. Exhibit A, mm-hmm. Saw Gerrera.
Yeah.
We see him in the Clone Wars, we see him in Rogue One, we see him now in Rebels, and we may see him beyond that. I guess we see him in Catalyst.
Oh yeah.
So he's showing up in a lot of different areas, and there are very few characters overall that really do that have shown up in that many venues. Mm-hmm. We have characters that span a wide swath of the Star Wars story, but very few that really jump from comics to books to TV shows to movies, and Saw is one of those.
Yeah.
And I think we're seeing a lot of the benefit of the story group in the fact that these tie-ins, these pieces of the story are starting to fit together fairly nicely. Mm-hmm. Whereas with the extended universe, not that I really delved into that too much, so please forgive me if I misspeak here, but I think there was not as well done a job of smoothing the edges, sanding the edges between the seams of the story.
In a way.
Where, well, just as far as maybe an incongruency here or there, as far as stories or inconsistencies between characters, between storylines. Whereas now there's this group that's trying to control that as best they can across every media or medium that there is.
Yeah, that's
and
true.
it
That's
seems to really be having an impact
more
on
cohesive.
Yeah, that cohesive story. So if you just watch the movies, you get it. You can enjoy the story for what it is. If you want to delve in more to different mediums, Rebels or comics or books or all the above, there's the opportunity to do that, and I think it creates greater depth to the story.
Yeah, definitely.
So I think the cycle that we see is enhanced by that wider story, the depth of the characters, because if you haven't watched Clone Wars, if you haven't seen Rogue One, Saw Gerrera in Rebels is just kind of this sort of guy that they give a little bit of background to, that you know he's part of the rebellion, that he was fighting during the Clone Wars, that he has this connection to Rex, but really beyond that, not a whole lot.
Yeah, he just seems kind of like a random dude. But having read Catalyst, having seen Clone Wars, having seen Rogue One, you're very, very interested in what he has to say and his whole story. Yeah,
so I think that really makes a difference in terms of the strength of those characters and the strength of the story overall.
Yeah.
So those are our one-word reactions, and I think there's a lot of depth that we could continue to go into, but let's jump into the big three.
All right.
I think number one, a mystery mission.
Yeah.
So we get into the Rebels, our ghost crew going somewhere on a secret mission. They're finding out a little bit more. Bail Organa shows up, which we haven't seen in Rebels, I don't think.
Definitely not recently.
No. He's been hinted at.
Yeah.
But I don't think we've actually seen him all but maybe once or twice. Mm-hmm. And Hera's really the only one that knows who he is and what's really involved with him. And it kind of gives some of that background into what's going on, because we know the Ghost Crew had seen Geonosis with a lot of this building structures around it and no life forms on the surface. So we jump into this mission where we're trying to recover a team that went in and was trying to figure out what happened.
Yeah.
So it was interesting that Bail showed up, and that the mission initially was, at least with Saw's team, to figure out what was going on, and the fact, as we kind of see the episode progress, how the Rebels, both those very high up as well as even Hera, are hesitant to work with him because of the way he approaches the rebellion, approaches what he's trying to do.
He's very aggressive, and as they say, he's oh gosh, what is the word they say?
Extremist?
Extreme, yeah.
Yeah.
Sorry,
well, and that ties in again into what we see of him in Rogue One.
Yeah.
And how that hesitancy, I'm sure, continues to grow to work with him as far as the Rebel Alliance. Mm-hmm. So it'll be interesting to see if he shows up again in future episodes of Rebels or other mediums, as we get a little bit more filled in this timeline between where we're at in Rebels at the moment and then Rogue One and beyond.
Yeah. I'm curious to see if they show in Rebels the break between Saw's team and the Rebellion, because obviously that had already happened in Rogue One, and this seems like a step toward that, him starting to abandon orders and kind of working against the people that he came there to rescue him. He changes his tune eventually, but he was very close to totally dropping everything that they had planned to do.
Yeah, and it changes the story dynamic very quickly.
Yeah.
So number two of our big three is the fact that how do I put this succinctly? A change of plans, I guess.
Okay, yeah.
That the plan is to go and just figure out what's going on and recover Saw's team, and plans change very quickly as far as Ezra, Kanan, and Chopper going deeper into the planet to chase this bug that they're trying to find and figure out what he's doing. Sabine and Zeb are trying to recover parts to a shield generator, which is I know is going to come back within the next few episodes, or at least this season, to be a major factor within just the overall story arc of the second half of this season.
That's cool.
And how Saw is able to kind of divert or at least distract from the initial mission. Kanan's really trying to stay on it, and of course Ezra and even some of Rex are trying to push forward into this investigation into what's going on in a deeper sense on Geonosis, instead of just sticking to the initial mission.
Yeah, and Ezra does because he's curious, whereas Rex does because he has loyalty to Saw.
Yeah, and
Saw would do the same for him.
Yeah, I think to an extent. And,
well, that's what he says.
The dynamic between the relationship is fairly interesting because I think there's a level of mutual respect, but not to the extent where Saw is just going to listen to everything Rex says.
Yeah.
Whereas I think Rex kind of does the opposite, where he'll follow Saw a little bit more and maybe listen to him a little bit more than is good for him, whereas Saw is very one-track minded.
Yeah, I think Saw is more stubborn in his thought processes and what he's focused on. But Rex does try to stop him when he's trying to basically kill the bug.
Yeah, and I think that's that extremism that's coming out, and not that Rex would take something to an extreme, whether in that same direction or an opposite direction, but I got the feeling that he wasn't going to react in the same way that Saw would.
Yeah.
So it's just interesting seeing kind of that dynamic and a friendship, or at the very, very minimum a relationship, going back as far as theirs does.
Yeah.
And then number 3 is, I think, best kind of summed up by escape.
Yeah.
So not only is the Ghost crew along with Saw trying to escape the Imperial ship that shows up, the transport, the light cruiser that shows up, but the bug that they find, Click Clack, shows up, or is trying to escape as well.
Yeah.
And but escape in a different sense. Not so much. There's elements of him trying to escape from the Ghost crew and Saw in particular, but I think escape just in general from whatever situation he finds himself in order to preserve his egg.
Yeah.
Whereas I think
escaping the fate of his race.
Yeah, and I think the weight of that is a lot more than what the Ghost crew is going through, but I think that same sort of element of escape or preservation, not only for their mission, but for the information that they found in trying to find evidence for the Empire destroying, wiping out the Geonosian population.
Yeah.
And if you've read Catalyst, you have a little bit more of an idea of why that is and what has happened.
Yeah. And
again, it's that tie-in that the dynamic of the story is a lot broader. It makes sense on its own, but it's the depth and precision of the story is so much more impactful if you have experienced the greater breadth of that storyline, instead of just, okay, the Empire was obviously here doing something with Geonosis. Click Clack draws something in in the sand multiple times, a circle within a circle. No one on the Ghost crew really knows what's going on, but us as the audience seeing it, it's
particularly those of us who've read a Catalyst or just know that what the Geonosis did.
Yeah. It becomes very obvious
Yeah.
that they're building the Death Star.
Yeah.
And how that impacts their race, their planet, and how they're interacting with the Empire and then the rebels as a result.
Yeah.
So what's just kind of your bottom line of these 2 episodes? What are your thoughts?
Just my thoughts in general.
Yeah. The great episodes, and just kind of is a weak start to the second half of season 3.
I think it was interesting and it was fun. It was a bit slower than maybe just I don't know. It felt slower to me than the beginning of the season, where it's, I guess, with interactions with Thrawn, just get me so like hyped up and on edge.
Yeah.
That it feels like there's more going on, even if it's still just like them going through the day-to-day issues they have to deal with.
Mm-hmm.
A lot of this episode was just kind of wandering through tunnels, which there was a purpose for it and there was stuff going on, but it felt slower because I didn't feel on edge. I didn't feel like I was really worried about what was going on. There was a point that they, I want to say camera, but it's not a camera, obviously. It's animated, but what is sort of the camera comes down and is looking at Ezra from below, and they're looking through the tunnels. I started getting nervous thinking that there were going to be Geonosians like on the ceiling that they can't see, but then there weren't. So then it was like, okay, I guess it's not that as interesting or as exciting as it seemed like it was going to be. And then they kind of just kept wandering. So it was not as, I guess, adrenaline inducing than the beginning of the season.
Yeah, I could see that. Well, I think that's kind of twofold in the fact that it's a 2-episode arc, so there's not as much, I don't think as much urgency in driving the story forward.
Yeah, that's true.
But I also think just the elements of trying to build up Geonosis being empty.
Yeah.
Whereas a lot of those shots are very reminiscent of episodes of the Clone Wars, and when there were Geonosians just filled in the place, and drones everywhere.
Yeah, that's true.
So
that's true.
I felt
emphasizes the difference.
I felt some of those were callbacks to some of those other storylines, and trying to draw a distinction between them.
How empty it is compared to how full it was before.
Yeah. And I think these were 2 strong episodes in terms of moving the story forward, but I think more than anything, it was all about drawing a level of congruency between Rogue One, they essentially took a break for the premiere of Rogue One, and kind of let that storyline brew a little bit, and then we're coming back and we're getting an important character from that film in the TV series. And I thought it was interesting, kind of the dynamic they created with Saw, in him not being as paranoid as he was in Rogue One, but it being a part of seeing that development.
Yeah. Kind of see him taking steps toward what we see him become in Rogue One.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And that begs the question, what will you become when you're a rebel? It's a bummer that line was taken out of Rogue One, but a good story nonetheless.
Yeah.
So I'm excited to see what's going to happen with the remainder of this season.
Yeah.
And we've gotten a trailer for that, which we don't have time to dive into on this episode, but hopefully soon we'll kind of pick that apart, hopefully before we get into the meat of the rest of the season. We've had Rogue One, which we've obviously already seen tie-ins to, and it'll be
Yeah.
interesting to see how much more that kind of comes to fruition. I'm waiting for some of those Easter eggs that we saw in Rogue One make their way or start to tie together with
Yeah.
Rebels.
General Syndulla.
Yeah, so that'll be interesting to see, and we'll likely talk more about those as well.
Yeah.
But I think this kicks off an interesting time in Star Wars in general, when not only do we have our first standalone film apart from the saga films. I kind of go back and forth with it being a true standalone because it's so much a part of
Yeah.
the storyline. So I don't know if standalone is the best term for it.
Yeah.
It's a part of the story that's not focused on the Skywalkers.
Yeah. But it's still the main story.
Yeah, so that's interesting. I'll be curious to see how Han Solo fits in with
Yeah.
those, and it sounds like it's not going to be as tied into the saga films, but it's still a part of the story.
Yeah.
So I find that very interesting and fun. Just a lot going on as far as Star Wars, and kind of the breadth of the story continuing to widen.
Yeah.
And it'll be really fun and interesting to see where season 3 goes. I think we're gonna get even more tie-ins or depth to the story.
Yeah.
Because you haven't even watched the trailer yet, have you?
I haven't. I don't like watching because I don't want to know ahead of time.
Oh my gosh, there's so many good things, and we'll have to
Maybe-
talk. We'll
maybe I'll
have
have
to
to.
talk about them. You have no choice.
Okay, twist my arm.
Okay. No, I won't twist your arm.
Okay.
I'll be nice.
Thank you.
I'll just plead, beg, because I need someone to talk about these things with.
Okay, fine. I'll watch, and then we can talk.
Okay. All right. That wraps up this episode of Rebels Reaction, reacting to Ghosts of Geonosis Part 1 and 2, a kickoff to Part 2 of Season 3. That was
Lots of
That
numbers.
was a lot of numbers. A fun beginning to the second half of season, and I think the continued great season that Season 3 has been.
Yeah.
So for Rebels Reaction, this has been Tyler.
I'm Christine.
Until next time, may the Force be with you.